Jacob Barnes comes in a blowout situation that saves Trent Thornton from coming in.
Yes, sir, there she goes.
Hello and welcome to episode 130 of Section 138. I'm your host, Mark Colley, as always, joined by Bryson and Jacob. How are you guys?
Doing good, Mark, on this Father's Day Sunday. A pretty good ending to this week for the Jays. It wasn't looking too good, but all of a sudden, that second half of Game 2, and of course today in Game 3, definitely a little bit better and back to 500.
Yeah, it looked disastrous until about the ninth inning of yesterday's game, and then everything got a whole lot better from there. A miraculous comeback on Saturday, and then Sunday, as we record this, the Blue Jays took that one 7-4. So, Jacob, how are you?
Yeah, you know what? This team's doing well. I'm doing great. And best part is the good news might not even be over because it's currently Sunday night, but give it 24, 48 hours and we might even have some even better news going into a Miami series.
Yeah, you're of course talking about the Springer news. We anticipate Springer being back probably in that Miami series. The Blue Jays made a move today, or they're planning to make a move to make room on the roster for someone like Springer. So we'll see if that actually pans out or if they're waiting a little bit longer. But we know that the minor leagues have an off day on Mondays, so we'll see what happens there. But bottom line, today, even just 2-3 days after we last recorded, things are looking so much better. And this is kind of what we hoped for, what we anticipated going into a series against the Orioles, who are, as we know, have the worst or second worst record in baseball. But after Friday's game, it looked kind of like disaster was setting in. Like, it looked like this team was dead in the water. It looked like there was no hope for the Blue Jays moving forward, but thankfully we got those games on Saturday and Sunday. What are some takeaways from this series for you guys? For me, it's probably the biggest one is today, Hinge and Ryu. Just his performance on the mound. We've talked about his struggles before, and he's his command has been off, his velocity has been down a little bit, and a lot of people have been concerned that this is an aging curve we've been so scared about. But today he came back out there. Yes, it's against the Orioles, but this is a team that, had 6 home runs in yesterday's game. So came out, 7th inning pitched, 3 hits, 1 earned run, which was on a solo shot in the first, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts. It was a huge improvement over what he did last time out. That's the big takeaway from this series, for me at least.
Yeah, and with Ryu, I'll just point out only 3 hits, 2 of those after the first inning. So he bounced back and he was fantastic. But one thing that I noticed is in game 2, when you look at the run production for the Blue Jays, the top 4 in the order were they were lights out for them. Marcus Semien had 3 RBIs, Bichette had 2, Guerrero had 3, and then Grichuk had 1, and a lot of those came in the later innings of the game. But these are the guys that you're paying big money to give you runs, and this is what they did. They came in. Obviously, we know what happened in the 9th inning with Guerrero, Grichuk hitting go-ahead runs, Bichette with 7 straight foul pitches or fouled off pitches, and
Bad of the
finally,
season.
yeah, that it must have been like 10 minutes long, but that was a fantastic AB, and it showed that this team doesn't quit. They had a terrible ending to the first game in the series, and even before anything happened in the first inning, I was saying, you know what, it's a new day. Let's see what this team can do. Didn't look the greatest at the start, but they rebounded, and obviously they won that game, and then they won the last game in the series. So that's what I'm looking at. Like, the offense, it was a lot better. Bullpen, especially in game 3, I thought was good. Trent Thornton did get a little roughed up, 3 earned runs in the 1 inning that he pitched, but Tyler Chatwood had a scoreless outing. Did look a little shaky in the start, 4-pitch walk to start his outing, but then he got the outs he needed, and it got the Blue Jays out of a jam, or out of the game. And overall, it was a good series. Yes, it's the Baltimore Orioles and you expect them to win, but I think coming into the series and after game 1, I don't think that anyone was expecting much of a winning series from the Blue Jays, but I'm happy with what I saw. It looks good. The offense was pretty good. Reese McGuire also, he had a 4-for-5 game today on Sunday with 2 RBIs. I think we should give him a little bit of credit. He didn't really know what he was going to do coming into this season with Danny Jansen and Alejandro Kirk looking to be the 2 catchers, and they were the 2 catchers until both of them are actually on the IL right now. So give it to Reese McGuire. He didn't really know what his position on the team was going to be, and maybe it just took 2 injuries, but he's finally here, and he's showing that last season where he hit, I think, under 100 is not necessarily the production that we were going to get from him. But that's, I think, the biggest takeaway for me is the offense. It was a lot better in this series, especially coming back from the New York series. And it wasn't even terrible in that series, but there were times when they just couldn't get it done or the bullpen didn't necessarily lock it down. And although that wasn't fully the case in all of the games, I will say that the two wins in the series did show what the Blue Jays won those games by being the Blue Jays, by out hitting your opponents, and when you needed to, you get good outings from your pitchers.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't start off good, and that's what I mentioned right off the top. It didn't start off good, and even in game two, we all know kind of what happened. There was a bench clearing. The bench was cleared. Alek Manoah was tossed. It was 7-3, and it just wasn't looking good. And I was just sitting. I remember watching the game, sitting there, and kind of realizing, especially since we record every like at the end of every series, of what the heck would we have like spoken about if the Jays lost this series and the worst case get swept, because it looked really bad from the start. It looked like they were gonna at least lose the series because it was 7-3. But hand in hand, they came back, they rallied back in the later innings. And then of course they won today as well. But yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna touch on the first game too much because we don't really need to recap a 7-1 loss to the worst team in the American League East. But that second game, like I said, right after the bench is cleared, pretty much 7, 8, 9 all scoring runs, a 6-run inning in the ninth inning. And that kind of led the way to for the Jays to rally back. And I mean, everyone was kind of clicking at that point. Simeon had 3 RBIs, Bichette had 2 RBIs, Guerrero had 3 RBIs, Grichuk had an RBI. Everyone was contributing. And of course, Simeon homered a couple times as well. And Vladdy as well homered. The team went 4 for 8 runners in scoring position. And I thought the bullpen managed to, I guess, hold the lead down in the later innings. And I go back to what I said the last time when we kind of, Mark and I disagreed with your take, Jacob, about how Dolis came in for Romano in that 8th inning or the 9th inning or whatever the heck it was. Guess who went back out for 2 innings and secured the save, for not even the save, but in this case, secured the win for the Jays? That was Jordan Romano. You brought him in the 8th inning, and right away, right when the Jays took that lead, you knew right away nobody was warming up. The right thing to do, send them back out. And that's exactly what I said when we were talking about it. And that's exactly why they won that game. They went with their best reliever, especially when it mattered, especially when they needed a win after what the heck transpired in game 1. And I guess in the second or the first half of game 2, that was the best decision. And I was so thrilled when it happened. And of course, going into today, a 7-4 win, 14 hits, and of course a 5-run 5th innings where it started, because it kind of started off slow. And even with Hyun-Jin Ryu, when Mark, you brought it up, it didn't look good in the first inning again. And I remember saying it to, I don't know if it was you guys or some other person I said it to, was something's up with this guy. And all of a sudden he settled right back in and he looked like the Hyun-Jin Ryu we knew. He went 7 innings, 1 earned run at the end, 4 strikeouts, and like you guys mentioned, only 3 hits allowed. And even his walks were down. But his prior starts, he was walking multiple people, and today he only walked 1 guy. So encouraging to see for that. And of course, Tyler Chatwood, another one. Didn't look good with the 4-pitch walk right away, but I give him credit. He settled down. Perhaps he's moved past this rough patch. I'm not going to fully commit to that yet, but we are on the right track. And of course, it was also kind of nerve-wracking because of the reliever beforehand when Trent Thornton came in, allowing 3 runs in an inning, and all of a sudden the Orioles got back into it. So that's when you were like, uh-oh. And we were holding on for dear life. But I mean, it didn't turn out to be that way. Of course, Chat would give up the leadoff walk. And then other than that, he settled down. And he didn't end up allowing a run, and that secured the win for the Jays. So now they win 2 out of 3 against Baltimore. I still think they should have swept. But anyways, the way this team's been playing, I'm going to take 2 out of 3. They're back to 500. That's, I guess, a positive sign. I mean, it is. Now there's 7 games back, so they made up a game. They did. But all of a sudden now the Yankees are starting to win games too. So how convenient is it for the Jays to, I guess, get back to 500, but all of a sudden they're trailing the Yankees now by 3 games as well. So now you have an off day tomorrow. You have another couple winnable games against Miami before you host Baltimore and Buffalo. So you have 2 winnable games against Miami. George Springer appears to be back. I mean, we can't obviously confirm it, but Jeremy Beasley was sent down after today's game, and they're going to be announcing the corresponding move on Tuesday. That's pretty significant. And, for the first time, I guess, all year, offensively, the Jays, it looks like they're going to have a healthy lineup. Of course, we're going to talk about where Springer's going to play, where Simeon's going to line up, all this. But I mean, step 1 was to get back to 500. You have George Springer back now. You're in a stretch right now where the schedule is favorable. And now the Jays need to capitalize on these wins. So if for sure it was a successful 2 out of 3, now let's sweep Miami with these 2 games. And of course, you have Baltimore on the weekend. take 2 out of 3 again. Why not?
Yeah, not to be a Debbie Downer here, but I do think that there are still obviously big problems with this
Oh,
team.
for sure.
I think we saw it in today's game. Matt Harvey coming into today's game, his last 7 starts, I think it was, he had an ERA above 14, if I'm remembering the number correctly, and he only had one of those starts in which he gave up less than 5 runs. Um, he's been horrible. Like, there's no beating around the bush there, and I expected the Blue Jays to come out swinging, but for the early goings, for the first few innings, it seemed like they were really, really struggling against him. So I still have concerns about the consistency of the offense. I still have concerns, obviously, about the bullpen, but by and large, the takeaways from this series are obviously incredibly positive. And Jacob, you mentioned Reese McGuire. That's another positive. All around baseball, but especially the Blue Jays have been struggling to get production from the bottom of their lineup. And having someone like Reese McGuire there in the bottom part who's really heating up, he has over his last 7 games a batting average of 421, and he had 3 doubles today. So just an incredible performance from him, and it helps extend the Blue Jays lineup, especially when you consider George Springer coming back. If you get Lourdes Gurriel in there regularly, of course, we had Teoscar Hernandez on the maternity list, and he's coming back. So having all those guys back extends the Blue Jays lineup, and it helps them so much in terms of consistency of the offense. Another thing that helped them or appeared to help them this weekend was that ejection and benches clearing brawl, if you want to call it a brawl. They didn't really fight, but in game 2 on Saturday, I think we're all on the same page here, but Alek Manoah shouldn't have been tossed. That much is clear to me. I assume it's clear to you guys. Do you guys think that that was kind of, I know it's easy to rewrite history and look at this as a turning point so far in the season, but it seems like that moment really lit a fire under the Blue Jays and got them going. I don't know if that's really what it is, and I think it's convenient to be able to pin on it on that, but a lot of people have been doing that. So what do you guys think?
You know what? I saw quite a few guys on that, not even just on the team, like on the active roster, but I saw coaches and I saw managers just as equally involved in that benches clearing brawl as the players. And I think that really was maybe the boiling over point of our pitcher struggling. You know, Alek Manoah, he was actually very good. An ERA under 3 going into that start. Now it's almost or it's above 4, considering that he only threw 3 1/3 innings. But you have a guy that you're expecting to do well. You have a team that you're expecting to do well, and they just, I mean, obviously the team hasn't been performing well, and now you have your pitcher not only not being the pitcher that you've seen all throughout the his first couple starts, but now he's being ejected for a reason that you don't think is very fair. And credit to the Blue Jays. You know, maybe this was really that thing where they say, I think we're done with this. We can't lose a 6 straight game. If they had lost that game, that would have been their 6 straight loss, especially to the Baltimore Orioles. Like, no disrespect to the Orioles, but the Blue Jays would be the clowns of baseball if they got swept or lost that series. You can't have that happen. And look what you see. You see the Blue Jays get an unfavorable call. Alek Manoah was not intentionally throwing at whoever it was. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was not an intentional throw. He was getting roughed up, and he's a rookie. He's made, I think it was 4 starts coming into that game. You're not going to go up and try to show up anybody by hitting them. The worst Alek Manoah is going to do is stare at home plate while he's rubbing the baseball. But even that's really not bad. Like nobody's taking any offense to that. So for the Blue Jays, it's like, hey, you know what? This is not a good thing. We don't like this, and we're gonna hopefully do something about it. And they rallied in the ninth, started from the lower half of the order, batted around, and they won. It was great, and I feel like it was one of those things where maybe that was truly the tipping point, and maybe the necessarily the loss in the previous game wasn't the tipping point, but it was okay. It's a new day today, and then they fall behind and their pitcher gets thrown out, and it's like we're done with this. Like we can't keep doing this. We're supposed to be a contending team. We're supposed to have one of the top outfielders in baseball on our roster, and we're obviously they don't have Springer yet. They haven't had him for more than a couple games, but they're supposed to get him back, and they know that they're a better team than this. And to say we're going to keep letting these little things add up and result in losses is just it's not what the team's supposed to do. And they took control of it. sort of. I mean, it was a weird brawl. Like you could see the Orioles, some of their staff were like, "No, guys, get behind there," but or stay in the dugout. But then everyone else was just kind of beefing each other. And you see Guerrero pick up Freddie Galvis and pick him up, bring him back over to the dugout, and you see the managers, they're all in it. Like everybody was in this argument, and it was like, we're done. Like, fair enough. You want to say that Alek Manoah intentionally threw at a guy? That's a load of BS. If you ask pretty much anybody, like that was not intentional. But either way, Blue Jays came back. Anthony Kay came into the game, I think, a little bit earlier than he was expecting to, but credit to the Blue Jays. They got themselves a win, and Alek Manoah, let's see where he can go from there. I think he'll be even more fired up because, especially after getting ejected for a terrible reason, the first thing I think that's on his mind is, I'm going to try and destroy the Orioles in my next start. But yeah, it was a fantastic way to kind of get into the middle part of the game. They eventually win that, and then they win the second game, or the third game, to win their second straight. But yeah, it was a weird situation, but maybe we can look back on at the end of a 10-game win streak and say that this was probably the fuel to that fire.
Absolutely, it was. And yeah, I mean, if Orioles fans believe it was intentional, I'm not gonna, try and convince on my part to change their mind, because I think logically, why would it make sense for Alek Manoah to do that? So, and for Alek Manoah now, who's made what, like 4 or 5 starts now, I think it's 5 starts now. He's had some good ones, some bad ones. The last thing he's doing in his rookie year is trying to start fights, but obviously he's going to defend himself when the time comes. And what was with that? Why was Freddie Galvis all of a sudden freaking out from the dugout? I don't know what the heck was going on there. I don't know who he was mad at. Was it Manoah he was mad at? But yeah, I thought that was a little, I'm not going to say childish, but like, I just didn't understand why he was so fired up. I mean, maybe it's the Blue Jays factor since he was here a few years ago. And obviously he didn't last the year with them. Nothing against him, but that's just the state of the team. But I was a little shocked by that. But either way, I mean, whatever the heck happened, maybe that also motivates Manoah for his next start. Like you said, Jacob, maybe he's more motivated, because I believe he will be in line to start now against that next weekend against Baltimore back in Buffalo. But it definitely helped the team. I mean, it definitely lit a spark. It was 7-3. Like it looked bad. And at the point, you're at the point too, where I was so close to turning off my TV. But after that bench clearing brawl, I stayed tuned in for it. Maybe it was expecting more to happen later on. I guess there was always the chance, but either way, I mean, the only thing that happened was the Jays scoring 8 runs in the last 3 innings. So, I mean, that was all that mattered the most. And for a team that needed a spark, we know George Springer's coming back. That's going to be a spark. They needed something, like, especially in that game alone, they did. And maybe that was the case, but yeah, it's just been these two, or this past weekend alone, just going over the stress of what if the Jays get swept by the Baltimore Orioles. And I remember I joked about it with you guys, I guess at the beginning of the series, and it actually, like, for a glimpse day or two, not even, maybe a game and a half, it felt like it was actually heading towards that direction. And even with Matt Harvey today, who had a good start, like, he didn't have a good start, but he had a good start to his appearance or his outing. Like, through the first 3 innings, he was good. And all of a sudden you're like, what, how is Matt Harvey with a 7.76 ERA shutting us down? And of course the Jays bared down in the 5th inning. So thank God for that. But yeah, there's a whole whack of things this over the past of the week, or the course of the weekend. And Dan Shulman, who is a friend of the podcast, I thought he had a really good stat. And I'm sure you guys saw it as well with Bo Bichette, because I believe you guys mentioned it too at the beginning, of how long his at-bats have been. He pretty much tweeted a stat saying Bo Bichette has fouled off 278 pitches this season, which is more than anyone in baseball. And his foul ball percentage is the second highest, behind only Yermin Mercedes on the White Sox. So he's on pace for 30 plus home runs, 100 plus RBIs. He's on pace for a good season. We know that he loves swinging for the fences, it looks like, at least, but I give him credit. I didn't even realize the amount of foul balls he has hit this year. And I guess all the at bats he's been in, working the counts and all that. So it just, over the course of the weekend, it started off very stressful, but near the end, it was almost like a sigh of relief that the Jays did this. And now, like I mentioned too, you got a 2-game series with Miami. They got to capitalize on this. They have no choice. And you're getting George Springer back. The excuses for the offense are going to slowly start running out since they're getting healthy. And it looks like too, by the bullpen, people are slowly starting to get healthy as well from there, in terms of Ryan Barucki, Julian Merriweather, who are very important pieces to this bullpen. So hopefully by the end of the month too, we see at least one of them back.
Yeah. Getting Springer back presents its own sort of conundrum for the Blue Jays, because, as we've mentioned, the lineup can certainly use someone like Springer. It's going to make it a lot deeper and a lot longer, but adding Springer gives the question of where do you put him in the lineup? And a lot of people have been thinking about this, and really no one, in my opinion, has come up with a good answer to this question. And earlier today, Charlie Montoyo was asked about where George Springer is going to bat when he comes back, and he actually said in the 5 or 6 hole, probably in the beginning until he gets going. He said he's hesitant to touch the top three of Simeon, Bichette, and Guerrero because it's been clicking so well so far this season. That's different from what I expected. I always expected, I think this was a lot of people's expectations, that George Springer would be leading off no matter what, no matter how well other people are doing. This is a guy you're paying $150 million. Like, you're paying him that money for a reason. He is right now going to be the face of the franchise, with the exception of maybe Vladimir Guerrero Jr. You need to treat him like that and put him in the leadoff spot where he's played before. That was my expectation going into this. Whether that's the right move or not, that's what I thought was going to happen. Maybe it was an easier conversation to have when Bo Bichette wasn't as hot as he is right now. You put Springer at number one, Simeon at number two. You move Bo Bichette to the 5 hole. And then Grishik to the 6 hole, Gurriel to the 7 hole, or maybe you mix in Biggio there to switch up the lefty righties, and then Lourdes Gurriel Jr. 8, and then Reese McGuire, Riley Adams, or whoever it is, number 9. That would be my ideal lineup when I thought he was going to be leading off. But honestly, if he is okay with hitting fifth or sixth when he's starting out, if the Blue Jays are okay with that, if they kind of have that conversation and say, look, this is the best thing for our team, I'm okay with that. I think it helps the Blue Jays to give him, kind of easing it into the situation. It helps the Blue Jays to not mess with those guys at the top of the order. And honestly, George Springer is kind of a run producer. He's someone who, we saw it in only his brief stint with the Blue Jays so far. He hits a lot of home runs. To have a guy like that in the leadoff spot seems kind of like wasting situations, wasting RBI that you could drive in. So I think moving him to the fifth spot, at least to start, is a good move. Long term, I think we're going back to what I said. It's going to be Springer number one, Simeon number two, moving Bo Bichette down. But I think for right now, that's how it's going to look, and I'm okay with that.
One thing I will say is I feel like George Springer would pitch if it meant he could get into the game at this point. Like I feel bad for him. Like he's missed almost half of the entire season, half of his first season with the Blue Jays. But anyways, going on to where he fits in the lineup, that's interesting that Charlie Montoyo actually said that. But I actually do think it makes a little bit of sense. Now, going into the season, the Blue Jays had two leadoff hitters. They had Kevin Biggio and Bo Bichette, and George Springer, excuse me, because Springer led off with the Astros. Thing is when you take those two, I initially thought it was going to be Biggio 1 and Springer 2 because of the fact that Springer is more of a power hitter and more of a drive guys home type of player, whereas Biggio was more of the guy. I think last season he did lead the Blue Jays in on base percentage. So you get a guy like Biggio get on first base, get on second or whatever, and then Springer can drive him home. I thought that was what the plan would be. Obviously, that's not necessarily been the case this season, and I don't really think that you take Simeon, Bichette, and Guerrero and change anything, especially considering, I mean, Marcus Simeon's had a bit of a drop off since his fantastic May, but you're still not going to touch somebody like him. And I'd be like, if I was Marcus Simeon and I hear, and Charlie Montoyo comes to me and says, look, we're paying George Springer this money. He's going to take your spot in the leadoff spot. I would honestly feel disrespected. Like I would, because Marcus Simeon is not the type of guy that you want to switch just because you're paying somebody else a little bit more and you have him locked up long term. But ideally, so I'm looking at their lineup today, which the top three was Simeon, Bichette, Guerrero, and then after that it was Hernandez, Grichuk, and Biggio. I think what you do is maybe you put Springer fifth, Grichuk sixth, and then you put Biggio. Then it's whoever it is, Gurriel, Espinal, McGuire. Like you figure it out. Obviously, Gurriel is probably going to play most of the games. I don't see him sitting out many games. Espinal might see a bit of a reduction in playing time because the only reason he was able to play today and over the last couple games is because Biggio's been in the outfield. And once you do that, the way I see it is you have Springer in center, Gurriel in left, Teoscar Hernandez in right, perhaps Grichuk in right or DH or whatever. Like I don't think you take him out, even if though he's hit under 200 this month. I still think you give him a chance to see if he can still level himself up a little bit. But yeah, in terms of right now, I would put him in the 5th spot and then just work from there, whether it's Grichuk underneath him or Grichuk Gurriel after him and then McGuire or whatever it is. But ideally, I would have him in the 2 spot. Probably what I would potentially do then, that also has a bit of a problem because then where do you put Bo Bichette? And to be completely honest, I think the best thing we can do is just say we'll figure that out when we get to it. But if I were to predict it now, the way I would probably have it, assuming Marcus Semien stays with the team for this entire season. I know there have been some not necessarily trade rumors, but trade discussions happening among fans on Twitter. But assuming Semien stays with the team all season long, what you potentially have is Marcus Semien 1, George Springer 2, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. 3, and then maybe Bo Bichette 4, and then you just push everybody else down a spot. I don't know if I want to do that. Like that's the tough thing. Like you've gone through almost half a season and this has worked for you to varying degrees, but it's worked for you. And it's tough to say, okay, well, we're just gonna implant George Springer into this lineup because we have to. And I mean, they do have to. Like obviously, they're paying him $28 million this year. They've missed out on him for half the season, but I feel like that's just the best way to put it. Is for now, Springer's your number 5 hitter, but ideally you're trying to work him into your number 2 spot, and then you're not touching Guerrero. Guerrero's leading the league in home runs. He's an MVP candidate. He's probably the forefront of the MVP race right now, unless Shohei Ohtani gets a couple extra votes. But you're not moving him, and that's why I would probably put Springer above. I would put Springer above Guerrero because you're not moving Guerrero, and that's the better spot to put Guerrero in, and he's been successful all season. But it's gonna. I do not envy Charlie Montoyo and these players having to discuss this because it's gonna be hard. Like for some guys to say you're gonna be moved down to a spot that you're not used to in the lineup because somebody else has veto power. It's not gonna be easy, but yeah, just what I think will happen now is you'll see Springer in the 5 spot for depending on when he comes up. If he comes up for the first game in Miami, then for that whole series, and then possibly most of, if not all of the Baltimore series after that, and then the Blue Jays will go from there. Possibly move him up, but who knows? Maybe he stays in the 5 spot all season long, which isn't even a bad option considering the Guerrero, Hernandez, the run producers, and the guys that can get on base for you above him, because he could still send those 2 home also. Like, let's not forget that like Guerrero and Hernandez are going to hit their home runs, but they can also hit their doubles and their singles, and they can get on base, and then Springer can drive them home. So one thing's for sure, this lineup is sure as heck going to be deep. Like, it almost reminds me of the 2015 Blue Jays, just with a little bit more of a small ball mentality. It'll be a deep lineup, and just getting Springer back, whether he's hitting 2, whether he's hitting 5, whether it's 6, is just it'll be a huge sigh of relief for everybody, for Springer and for the team and for the fans, because we've been wanting to see him, and he's like we want to see him because he's a good player, and that's the thing. He'll be a good player. So I'm excited to see him wherever he's in the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion stays the same going back to spring training. I think George Springer's the leadoff hitter on this team. However, do I think he starts in the leadoff position? I agree with you guys on that. I think he does start 5-6 because right now it is hard to take out Marcus Semien from the leadoff spot. But if you do, and if it gets to that point, like I don't think Semien should be or feel disrespected from it. I just think it comes to the point where you all feel you're putting your best lineup on paper, and it was supposed to be George Springer this entire time. But right now, it's so hard to, I guess, think about tweaking the lineup and moving Semien out of there. But I do think by the end of the season, I mean, I don't know how long it'll take. I do think eventually Springer will lead or end up back at 1. And I don't know if you guys heard this idea too, but Pat Tabler was talking about it on the broadcast where he had, and I know, yes, Mark knows this. I can already see about your reaction. And a lot of people were kind of, especially me, I was very confused by it, but he had the idea of Marcus Semien batting 9th, followed by George Springer at 1. And the problem with that is we all know is that you're obviously not guaranteed to have 4 at-bats at the 9th spot. You're kind of taking the chance of...
Yeah, where do you start with the problems with that?
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of problems there. But, I mean, Pat went on about it for about at least a minute and a half. He was pretty confident with it. I mean, I guess I understand the creativity behind his thinking, but I would be shocked if I ever saw that. So I do think Simeon stays at 1. And then Springer, I think, eventually goes back to 1. I have a few things that I just want to stay the same. And that is for Biggio to stay within the bottom 3. I want Teoscar Hernandez to stay at 4, because I think over these past 2 games as well, we kind of got the importance, and even back in April when Teoscar was out for most of the month due to COVID, is that how much his lineup does mean to this offense. And it's not really, it is talked about, but obviously you're talking about Springer, Guerrero, Bichette, and sometimes you're not always talking about Teoscar. And I think a lot of people sometimes forget the importance of his lineup in the cleanup, or his bat in the cleanup spot. So that's what I want to stay the same. There's been other ideas, maybe Simeon stays. I mean, I've also seen a concept where Simeon and Vlad swap, where Vlad goes 2, Simeon goes 3. And then, of course, Bo Bichette, I think we got to talk about that too, is maybe eventually he moves down to 5 or 6, and then Simeon does stay at the top of the order, but not leading off. There's so many different directions you can go in, but I just want those things I mentioned or what I want to for sure happen. And I think besides that, you can be very creative with any possible concept. But yeah, I mean, you can go Simeon in the middle of the order, which we did see for a brief time when he was removed from the leadoff spot because he was struggling originally. And you can see Simeon go down there as well, or sorry, Bichette, who I think we're talking about. And you can keep Simeon and Springer at the top of the lineup. There's so many scenarios where you can put this in, except for Simeon batting 9th. There's no way that happens. And I really hope Charlie Montoyo doesn't get any ideas from that. But yeah, I do think though, in the long run, I don't know how long it'll take that Springer is the leadoff man on this team, just because too, those last 4 years, he kind of has designated himself as a leadoff hitter back in Houston those past 4 years. So that's why I just think he's most comfortable in leadoff. And he said that multiple times going back to his introductory press conference back in the winter when he signed here. So that's where I think about it for Springer.
If there is one way to guarantee that Marcus Semien does not re-sign with the Blue Jays after this season, it is to bat him 9th. It's just, I'm at a loss. I know Tabby has. I know they all have questionable opinions. Tabby is the most guilty of that, but Buck as well. But that just blows it out of the water. That's like right up to number 1 on the stupid opinions list.
It's up there.
See, I don't mind. I don't mind the creativity, but I would rather, if you're gonna be a little bit unique with what you do, I would put Kevin Biggio in the 9th spot.
Yeah,
because
there's a difference between.
And I would support that as well.
Creativity and stupidity.
You don't put a power hitter in your 9th spot. Like, big brain moment for Pat Tabler.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, it's a jigsaw puzzle for sure. The Blue Jays will be struggling to figure it out over. I'm sure it's going to be weeks that they're figuring this out. It's not going to be a 1 day or 1 week thing. It's going to be a process, as with anything, and we'll play the hot hand and see how it goes. But the Blue Jays also have other incoming players. We learned tonight, just before we recorded, that John Axford has signed a deal with the Blue Jays pending a physical. It's a minor league deal, we assume. I don't think we've actually got confirmation of that, but it would be idiotic if it was anything but that. And the Blue Jays also traded for Jacob Barnes, a reliever on the Mets. They sent prospect Troy Miller the other way for him. Neither of these guys are big names, obviously. Like, John Axford hasn't pitched in the majors since 2018. The only reason he's signing with the Blue Jays is because he impressed in his Team Canada Olympic qualifier games a couple weeks ago. And then Jacob Barnes, like, he's sporting an ERA of 6.27 this season. He was strong in 2018. That was his last really good season. Neither of these guys are big names, but if I'm being honest, this is exactly what I wanted the Blue Jays to do. When we talked, I guess it was a week ago now, saying the Blue Jays have to make moves. They can't afford to go through this series against the Yankees and against the Orioles without doing anything. These were the moves I was talking about. I wasn't expecting moves for guys like, I don't know, Craig Kimbrell or Devin Williams or I don't know, those big names. I wasn't expecting moves for those guys because it's going to be very expensive. And the Blue Jays aren't going to be in the market for someone like that, especially this far away from the trade deadline. But even small pickups like this, so the Blue Jays can A, work their magic. Pete Walker can do what he does best and try to turn these pitchers around. And B, just fill in the depth in the bullpen. They desperately need extra arms, and it's a domino effect. Adding one guy, even if he's not that great, like Jacob Barnes, has a domino effect in that, okay, if Jacob Barnes comes in a blowout situation, that saves Trent Thornton from coming in. And Trent Thornton coming in a situation that's slightly better saves, I don't know, Anthony Castro from coming in. It gives these guys less pressure to perform in these situations. It gives Charlie Montoyo more options and Ross Atkins more options in terms of who to send up, who to bring down. It just opens up a world of possibilities, even if these guys individually aren't that great. So this is exactly what I wanted the Blue Jays to do. John Axford deal is a little bit questionable. Of course, it's minor league deal, but I'll be interested to see how that goes. But there's no complaining about this. I think it's exactly what the Blue Jays needed to do, and even if it doesn't work out, it doesn't really cost them anything.
And this is just this is like if I feel like if we had to describe the Atkins and Shapiro regime with one sentence, it would probably be something like Blue Jays acquire Jacob Barnes, because like at the end of the day they're constantly acquiring lower leverage, not lower leverage but lower risk guys, and somehow they turn them into fantastic pitchers. Go back to 2016, they acquired Jason Grilly, Joaquin Benoit, and both of them were fantastic down the stretch for them. Look at last year, Taiwan Walker, who I'm still sad is not with them anymore, but you look at the moves they made and it worked for them. Ross Atkins, Mark Shapiro, they know what they need, and they're not going to go out and give you. They're hardly ever going to go and make a blockbuster move like signing George Springer. It's appreciative, like I like it, but what we're most of the time what we're going to see is moves like this. And I mean, I'm looking at Jacob Barnes's career stats, and his first season with Milwaukee, a 2.70 ERA in 27 games. After that, it was a 4 ERA in 73 games, still with the Brewers, and then it was a 3.33 ERA in 49 games with the Brewers. So overall, with the Brewers, it was decent, sort of up and down, but not bad. But since then, his ERA has been over 7. It's been close to 7, 686, 831, 550. Like it's just been kind of all over the place, but it's an option, and it's somebody that, worst case, it doesn't end up working out for the team. It's not like they give up a huge prospect for him. And if it works out, it works out. Even if he is only a guy that comes out in blowouts or eats 2 or 3 innings when your starter gets rocked, it, like you said, Mark, it saves Trent Thornton. It saves whoever from needing to do that. And I think one of the problems is you see a lot of the Blue Jays higher leverage guys having to be used in not only the high leverage situations, but the other situations, because they needed arms and they needed someone to pitch. And I'd rather my better arms pitching than somebody that's struggling. But yeah, whatever. I mean, the both moves. I mean, we expect Jacob Barnes is going to be on the team. He's probably going to join them in Miami. John Axford's a little interesting. I'd like to see. It's currently just past 10 p.m. tonight, so not sure we'll hear too much about that until probably sometime during the weeks. But I'm interested to see what he's able to do. He was decent. He was okay with the Blue Jays in 2018, a 4.41 ERA, and then with the Dodgers only in 5 games, he had a 17, 18. That's a lot of numbers on that ERA, but his ERA was not the greatest with the Dodgers, but whatever. I mean, Major League's not the only time he pitches. Obviously, he was decent with Team Canada and his fastball was getting up to higher 90s, but both are interesting moves, and I'm excited to see what, if anything, they're able to do for the Blue Jays going down. I mean, who knows what happens? Like maybe they get Ryan Barucki and Julian Merriweather, all these guys back, and who knows what happens? Maybe they pitch, or maybe they don't even pitch after that. Maybe they're just here kind of to bridge the gap until then, or maybe they stay. Maybe they go to the minors and get stretched out, or maybe not stretched out, but just to get some work in. I don't know, but not bad moves. I'm excited to see what they're able to do, but yeah, it's one of those things that like it's not going to light the radars up on ESPN or MLB Network, but it's one where, hey, you're in the last game of the season and you need to qualify for the playoffs with the win. Maybe this is somebody that's been reliable for you and was able to be reliable because it was a very under the radar move that just it ended up working out for him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not excited with this at all. It's something that I think Jacob nailed on the spot, though. It's expected in a way. It's just kind of weird how John Axford was on my TV talking about the Blue Jays on Blue Jays Central not even a month ago. So that's going to be a little interesting to get used to. I assume he's going to start in the minors somewhere, possibly just begin at AAA. I don't know
Yeah,
how they'll handle that.
Ben Nicholson did confirm that it is a minor league deal.
Yeah, so that makes sense. I mean, if he jumped right into the MLB, talk about desperation. But even with these signings as well, I mean, Jacob Barnes, we know you guys went over his numbers, hasn't been the greatest. And perhaps he's a guy that, I mean, I'm sure we'll see him at some point this year, maybe soon within the next couple of weeks, but perhaps he's a guy that Pete Walker can work with and kind of turn around a bit. I mean, I hope this isn't the only thing that they do, and I don't expect it to be. I still think this is a year where they can go all in at the deadline, not all in, but I should say make some noise at the deadline and take that next step unless they're not interested in it. I mean, Ross Atkins confirmed today that they are interested in adding. And right now, unfortunately, the market's just dry. Like he pretty much flat out said that nothing's really available right now to them, but they are actively looking at it. So, and of course, they're also looking at starters, which is good, but closer to July, maybe middle of July, they got to be making more moves than this. And you got to be going after people that are going to help your bullpen. I mean, people with good numbers, that's all I want to see from them. But if they're going to start off by this, I have no problem with it. It's just very interesting, especially the John Axford one, where, I mean, he obviously impressed at the Olympic qualifiers for Team Canada. And Mark, you were the one that mentioned his velo was up around 96, 97. So I guess that's something to be, I guess looking forward to in a way. Like, it's just, I don't know. Like, I mean, his last game was September 21st of 2018, and that was against the Padres. And it wasn't the greatest outing for him. I think it was 3 hits to 1 earned run, and he didn't record an out. But either way, he's here now. He's going to be off Blue Jay Central. He'll be on TV in a different way, back as a actual pitcher. And Jacob Barnes, like I mentioned, I'm sure we'll see him eventually within the next couple of weeks. And you hope that he can help out in some way, because this bullpen is desperate for arms. And I'm sure this is not even close to the last of, I guess, the Jays or inquiring about adding pitching. So that's what I'm got my fingers crossed for in terms of making more noise at the deadline, if they decide to pursue that way of taking that next step and buying.
We will wrap it up there. Thank you to everyone who listened to this episode. As always, you can support our podcast by following us on social media at Section 138 Pod. You can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/Section 138 Pod. You can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, just to help spread the word about what we're doing. And then lastly, as always, our videos of our podcasts are up on YouTube, so you can watch the episodes there. So thank you to everyone who listened to this episode. Hopefully the good times keep going through this series against Miami, and then later that series against Baltimore, the 4-game set in Buffalo. But until then, we'll catch you next time.